Hi there, my name is Ben Frable. I'm an ichthyologist. An ichthyologist is a type of biologist that specializes in studying fishes. I currently work as the collection manager of marine vertebrates at Scripps Institution of Oceanography up here in La Jolla, California. The marine vertebrate collection you can think of pretty much as a library, but instead of books, we have preserved fish specimens in jars. My job is to kind of maintain and manage these over 2 million specimens of fishes that have been collected all over the world and make them accessible to researchers, educators, and artists from all over. A large part of my job is kind of figuring out how to tell fish apart. There's a lot of different species, so how do you tell two different species that look really similar apart, and then just also working on telling these things apart, and doing a little bit of research and say how to organize these things and figure out how they're related evolutionarily. And a big part of my job is also organizing these so other people can use them as well. And telling these things apart involves all sorts of things. It involves taking the specimen, looking at it, maybe counting how many spines it has, how many spots it has on its side, measuring where its fins are in relation to each other, measuring, how long its head is, looking at its teeth. Combining all those together allow us to really get an idea of how to tell these different fish apart. But a lot of that does kind of require me to actually have the specimen or specimens in my hands in front of me. So as you can imagine, during the pandemic, this was kind of hard. I had to work from home like a lot of other people for the first few months. I wasn't able to come in here to my nice lab. And so I spent a lot of that time kind of doing non-hands-on related stuff with fish, working with our data, that type of thing. It was a little challenging because usually, again, my job is a lot of hands-on work. However, a few months into the pandemic, one of my friends told me about this research expedition that was starting in Australia that had a remote component that we could potentially participate in. So there's a boat called the RV Falcore that's run by an institute called the Schmidt Ocean Institute, not to be confused with Scripps Institution of Oceanography. The Schmidt Ocean Institute runs this boat called the Falcore, and it's a very high-tech research vessel that is really geared towards taking high quality images, video, sonar scans, measurements in the world oceans. And scientists from all over can apply for time on the boat to kind of do research in their area of interest. The Falcore was on its way to Papua New Guinea to do a bunch of research there when the pandemic hit. And so it wasn't allowed to continue to Papua New Guinea, and they kind of got stuck in Australia. And so they were in Australia, and they were like, dang, what can we do? And so they reached out to some Australian researchers and were like, hey, is there projects locally here that might be of interest? And this one researcher who is a marine geologist named Dr. Robin Beeman, he's at James Cook University in Northern Australia, had an idea. He'd always wanted to do some more work looking at the deep parts of the Coral Sea. And what was really great here is because the Falcore is so connected digitally, like they can stream all their video and stuff. Nobody actually had to get on the boat to do research. So the boat was just all the crew that they knew were safe because they had all been living on the boat together for a month. And the crew went and did it. And all the scientists stayed at home or in their offices and directed them and told them kind of what they wanted them to do. Dr. Beeman's project, as I briefly mentioned, was called Visioning the Coral Sea Marine Park. So the Coral Sea is an area off of northeastern Australia. It's kind of, you may have heard of the Great Barrier Reef. So the Great Barrier Reef is in the middle of the Coral Sea, and the name the Coral Sea is because there's so many coral reefs in this area. So it's this big basin kind of off northeastern Australia, and it's very well studied, shallow water wise. It's the largest coral reef on the planet, the Great Barrier Reef. So there's a lot of people that are studying the organisms that live there, the environment, all sorts of that stuff. But the deeper parts of that basin, the deeper parts of that sea are actually very poorly studied. And this is actually pretty surprising to me because I just assumed that they would have been. But nobody had really done a lot of mapping at all using sonar. So to try to kind of, when I say mapping, that means they're bouncing a signal off the seafloor and kind of looking at the ridges and trying to find, where maybe there's little hills or underwater mountains, those types of things. Nobody had really done high quality mapping, and not a lot of work had been done filming the deep parts of the coral sea. And when I'm talking about deep, I mean kind of the areas below about 300 or 400 feet down to about 5,000 feet. So this is a great opportunity. So the falcore has a underwater robot called the ROV Sebastian that is connected to the boat and has all these great capabilities. It has a bunch of really high quality cameras that can film in 4K HD. It's got a little grabbing arm. It's got a little samplers, and it's got some baskets. So they wanted to use it to film the seafloor, look at the geological features, figure out what kind of rocks are down there. But also look at the benthic invertebrates. And when I say benthic, I mean these are bottom-dwelling invertebrates. So things like coral, sponges, maybe other slow-moving invertebrates like snails, crabs, sea cucumbers, sea stars, those types of things. And so they can use this little arm to take samples of a rock, pick up a rock, put it in the thing, pick up a coral, put it in the thing, those types of things. They started this project, and what's really cool with the falcore is all of their dives are actually streamed live on YouTube. So anybody in the world who has good enough internet access can log on and watch these dives live, or delayed a couple minutes. And usually there's scientists or other folks involved that are providing commentary or talking, so kind of explaining what people are seeing. It's a really cool opportunity. We found out about this and we were like, oh, there's going to be some really interesting fishes there. They started it, they weren't really thinking about fish. They were pretty interested in the rocks and the coral and stuff. But there's a live chat on the YouTube. So myself and some other fish researchers kind of found out and got on this live chat and started identifying the fish, talking about the fish. And what's really great is one of my colleagues, Kai T, he's a PhD student at University of Sydney in Australia. He's an expert in coral reef fishes, and especially in these deep coral reef fish. I've been working with him. I'm really good friends with him, and we've been working together for a few years. And he's the one who really got excited, and he actually ended up getting involved and became part of one of the team members of the project. And so they brought him in, and he was providing commentary on the fishes. We were able to kind of see, they were seeing this habitat for the first time, but we were able to see what fish were down there for the first time. People have, put nets down and used fishing gear and caught stuff. So we know generally what stuff might be down there, but nobody's ever really put a moving camera down there to film these things. So we took over and we called it the Fish Army. Team Fish showed up, and we were there kind of dominating the chat and identifying a bunch of really interesting fish. My interests are kind of all over the place. I don't specialize in the fishes of Australia, but I like all different types of fish. And so I've worked on everything from fishes here in California. I did a lot of my graduate work on freshwater fish in the Amazon, and I also work on deep sea fish a lot. With Kai, I work a lot on coral reef fish, and specifically on a group of fish called fairy wrasses that are very beautiful, very colorful. And they have a lot of members that occur in kind of these deeper reef environments. And when I say deep reef, this is kind of the part of the coral reef that's below about 200 feet, below scuba diving depth, where there's some light, but it's a bit dimmer, really unique coral and very, very unique fishes. And that's what we were really interested in when we first got involved. But I realized that I could use my other skills as a deep sea fish person, because they were actually going down to 3,000 feet or so and filming the fishes down there. Over the course of the survey, they kind of went all over the coral sea, again, very deep, where you get weird things like tripod fish and things called halosaurs, super weird cutthroat eels, really weird stuff, to kind of, more coral reef environment where you have things like these fairy wrasse and beautiful basslets and damselfishes around. And over the course of this, they conducted 42 different dives, at least video transect dives. And each of these dives is between 5 or 10 hours long. So it's quite a lot of footage from all over the Coral Sea. They didn't collect any fish specimens. You can't really grab the fish with that little arm, but we have tons of very high quality 4K video footage. So after they came back, they got us the footage, and myself and Ikai and a bunch of other fish people were joined by, and we brought in the big guns. We brought in all these fish biologists from Australia and people, experts in specific groups, to kind of help us go through the video footage and try to come up with a checklist of all the things we saw in the deep Coral Sea. Because again, nobody's done an exhaustive survey of this before. And so it's really cool because we were able to go through, we were able to get screenshots of some of these really unique fish that we saw there. And what was really great is we didn't just see things that we already knew about. We saw fish species that had never been recorded in Australia before, species that were known from maybe Papua New Guinea or Vanuatu, even farther away. We saw a fish that was only really known from Micronesia and French Polynesia, but is right there in the Coral Sea. And we also saw things that were definitely unknown species, new species of fish. Some of them are known unknown species. So these are things that we know are undescribed new species, but we've only ever seen them on video. Nobody's ever collected one. So we can't really put a new name on it unless we actually have a physical specimen in a museum somewhere that people can reference. So we saw a good number of those, including this one fish that we'd seen once before on a different survey that is probably a new genus, and still nobody's ever caught it, but we now know that it occurs in Palau and in Australia. It's really, really interesting. We also saw a bunch of fish that have never been filmed alive before. So again, we catch these things on hook and line, or with a big net or some other way, but they're dead, they're dying, they're on the boat. Maybe they show up in the aquarium trade, but they're only in an aquarium. They've never seen them in the wild. So we got brand new footage, live footage of some animals that had never been seen before. And beyond the fish, of course, there are plenty of new species of coral and sponges and samples there. So it ended up being a great project. It felt like I was actually able to be in the field, but I was sitting in my home, kind of sitting on the sofa sometimes, watching it on TV. And it was really great. And it turned out to this great project with lots of different people working all together. So right now we're kind of working on writing that all up, synthesizing the data. But what I will say is really right now, they actually just started another cruise on the kind of the other side of Northern Australia. So the Coral Sea's here. They're on northwestern Australia, kind of on some reefs on the north side of Australia near Indonesia. So you can log on if you just Google the falcore, the RV falcore. You can stream, watch all those things on YouTube if they're not live. You can watch old dives and kind of feel what it's really like to be an underwater explorer and a marine biologist kind of live there. Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. So at the end, would you have ever been able to collaborate with that amount of people and resources if this didn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a couple different of these kind of remote boats, I guess, with these remote, where they're able to stream from the thing. The US government actually runs one called the Oceanos. It's run by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And in the past, I've helped with identifying fish on that as well. So we kind of already knew this was a potential, but this, I think, was made even more magical by the pandemic. Just in what you just described, we were able to get a lot more people to participate, and we were able to focus a bit more on actually making it something cohesive, where we're just sitting there and being like, oh, cool fish. We're recording what depth do we see this fish at? Where do we see it? Making a big list so somebody can reference this, and we start to get a better idea of what things are actually living in the deeper parts of this very, kind of one of the most diverse seas in the world, right? The Coral Sea.
You guys come and see Ben. He's going to be Zooming live feed on May 1st, that Saturday, May 1st. We'll give you the exact time and the Zoom link on lovestemsd.org to know that. So I was just wondering, Ben, I heard that you might have a megalodon tooth and maybe something really cool that you might have with you on May 1st. Is that possible?
Oh, yeah, sure.
That would be awesome because I know a lot of kids would love to see that if you brought that. So if you guys come May 1st, he'll show you the megalodon tooth. Yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. So we're going to end this how we always end it. Stay curious and
Keep sciencing.